Namaste and welcome to today's introduction to basically the history of yoga. And we have to remember that in any yoga shala, anytime that yoga or any topic is brought up really, we shouldn't ignore where it came from. We shouldn't ignore the history or the surrounding principles and ideology in those areas that this practice and many others may have came from. We always have to look back to the origins. We always have to look back to the beginnings. And if we try to just experience the practice for what it is in this modern era, I think all of you in this school know that that's only going to bring us a certain level of accomplishment, a certain level of realization along the practice. And that's fine. But if you're looking for more, if you're looking for the deeper and truer components of yoga, then you're going to want to go deeper. You're going to want to dig. And that's one reason that I really look forward to sharing with you this and many other teachings about the history of yoga, where it came from, how it got to where it is today. Now, one of the main things that we hear, and I think this is one of the biggest things that is divisive or seems divisive for the practice, is that it involves a lot of figures that might be a little strange in the West. Figures with elephant heads, monkey men, people with multiple arms, and the depictions just some being brutal and some being absolutely beautiful. But nonetheless, either way, still being very confusing to those in the West that might want to approach the practice until they think that this might somehow disagree with their past practices or traditions. Well, it's not the case. That is not the case at all. These deities, as you'll hear me refer to them often, these deities, these figures, they were meant to represent energies. And when we look at them from the West, too often, unfortunately, I think that they're labeled as gods. Now, their divinity in that component, that is a very true aspect of their depictions, because everything, anything, even words, even stories, poems, songs, they're all divine. They all come from a certain source that was very primordial. It didn't have any influence of our material influence yet, and yet all of these amazing things have become our reality. So when we look at these energies and we see them praised, it's no different than how some might, praise nature in and of itself. There's practices all over the world where nature is truly praised. Practices where the sun, the moon, the stars might be praised. Not in a way that they're worshipped. It's very different. They're not seen as the one. They're seen as all fragmented components of the one. So this is where we can not only start to clarify the muddy waters, the confusion about the deities, but we can actually start to implement their concepts, their truths into our practice, into our lives. Not with any disagreement to our past teachings or traditions, not with any division or exclusivity. They're universal. And what you'll come to find, that no matter what story I'm telling you, no matter what deity I'm speaking of, they're going to be relative. They're going to be practical. They're going to be things that you can take from the story and bring into your everyday life. Now we see that this is how every text teaches. Every text teaches through parable. But certain texts, they start to teach with very flamboyant descriptions, very otherworldly concepts, and they do that to instill that amount of awe, that yearning to learn, to hear more stories, to see what happens next, similar to how a child might hear a story. And throughout all the texts, very similarly, we're told to keep that childlike mind, that childlike amazement and wonder towards the world. So we shouldn't be closed off to learning from new and different concepts, even if they go by different names and different languages and appear in very different types of depictions. Open your mind to these things, and I am going to share with you some beautiful stories, some really fascinating tales, characters that can truly influence your daily life, and again, not in a way of worship, maybe not even a way of praise, maybe just in a way of finding a moral to a story, right? And I really, really look forward to sharing this with you guys. So again, just to recap, the deities, these figures that might have come from any text, and I'll be speaking from many, many different texts, we got to remember that it's not exclusive, that their teachings aren't exclusive to any certain race or area to the world. These teachings were universal. They were meant to be universal, just like all the ancient texts, especially the spiritual ones that were trying to prescribe this higher-minded and divine line of concepts. And this is going to be fun. This is where we can take the stories from the postures and explain them out, so that when you do the posture, you know what it meant, why you're doing it. I'll give you a hint. It wasn't all supposed to be just animals, dogs and cows and cats, and no. Virabhadra, the warrior. Virabhadrasana doesn't mean the warrior pose. Virabhadra is one of those deities. He's one of those figures. Hanumanasana, the splits. Hanuman does not mean splits. Hanuman is the monkey man that I referenced earlier that I'm going to have a lot of stories to tell you about. There's the Nataraj, the dance of Shiva. Shiva, it doesn't mean the dancer's pose. Shiva has he is the dancer, but it's a very specific dance, a very powerful and meaningful dance. The goddess, that goddess pose that we typically see depicted is Kali Ma. And to know of Kali Ma's power and ferocity and just true love, uncomparable love, now we can breathe in the essence of these postures, rather than just making it a name, the title to a book. Let's read the book. And I'm thrilled, truly thrilled, to be able to share with you those stories from all the ancient texts. Thank you so much for joining for this one, and I really look forward to sharing the next one with you. I hope you look forward to hearing all these stories about Shiva and Parvati and Kali Ma and Ganesha and Hanuman and Vyasa and Narasimha. The list goes on and on and on. Peace, peace, peace. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Namaste.